Hello, I'm Oisín Fagan. I'm the writer in residence, or one of the writers in residence for Maynooth University this year. So I'd like to thank them, Maynooth University, for this opportunity, and Kildare County Council, specifically the arts branch, not the road building branch, but I'm sure they're good as well. And thank you for being here and not watching The Simpsons now. And this, I am with Ian Maleney, the writer of Minor Monuments, and he's written for The Guardian, The Wire, many different publications. He is the founder and manager of Fallow Media, which you should all check out. It's a brilliant online space. And we are here today to talk about the internet, specifically the internet as a written culture, but I'm sure we'll go all over the place with this. So thank you for being here. And thank you, Ian, for being here.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, here we are in my house. But yeah, so it's good to have you here, Ian. And I suppose I'll softball you into the conversation. And I'm going to be doing this in the kind of way, the kind of classic mature student. I've become a mature student, which I was always meant to be. So I'm going to make a lot of statements and then go, and then you kind of softball back to me. So not so much a question as a statement. So there is the story of the internet. We're all in the internet. It's this communication, military technology, this pornography machine. We all have them on us all the time in our pockets. They connect us all. They're probably going to be mandatory soon in some way or another. They're already mandatory in the sense that they control all our operating systems. So there's a kind of history of the internet that's led us to the present, which is an under-examined part of the internet as well. So it comes out of the Cold War technologies, huge fundings, maybe 100 or 200 geniuses, change DARPANET, link up these systems with funding from the Cold War. Originally a military technology, birth of personal computing in the 60s and 70s with, all of these people you've written about in the past, like Alan Kay and things like that. Then there's personal computing, machines get smaller, they get more affordable. Now we all have one, and here we are. So I suppose my first question to you is, this is my little history of the internet. Within that, is there anything you would like to elaborate on, or is there any part in this early trajectory, let's say from the 1950s to now, is there any vision that these early makers of the internet have that is foreclosed upon in the kind of pre-Marxist left sense of the term? Like there isn't a commons or a vision of the internet, maybe what it means, but also what the internet's capabilities could be. Is there any alternate history of this thing we have?
I think there definitely is, as always, like some degree of alternate history. I think like it's always kind of fun to me to think of like the internet, like the inter in internet refers to like intergalactic.
Oh, I didn't know.
Originally, which is this idea that you would have like basically the guy who oversaw a lot of the setting up of the internet and the technologies that make it up, a guy called J.C.R. Licklider. He kind of administered a lot of the funding and stuff like that. And he was like, if you ask people for a network that allows people in America to communicate, you'll get one that works for a state, but doesn't really work, across the entire nation. So he was like, if I ask for one that works for the entire universe, I might get one that works for the entire world. And I think that's like, it's such a optimistic sort of idea that you would have a protocol, which is what we ended up with, that would allow anyone to communicate with anyone using a standardized set of tools. And that had never existed before. It had never even been attempted before. It's fundamentally different from language in that you don't have to understand it. It's coded and encoded. So like information gets thought of in this completely different way, which I think is really fascinating. Like it's fascinating to think about it, like to abstract over what's been said or from where to where, and find ways of like just generalizing that process. and allowing anyone to participate in it. And I think that's like, to me, still the most exciting part of it, but it also is the part that like generates these problems because it abstracts over the problems of human life and culture and society and all these kinds of things.
Okay, right. You kind of hit all the points there. So I'm going to rewind. So it's a new way of communicating in the sense of, so I want to separate it into two things you said there. So there is the language that makes up computers, which is a language I don't speak, which is like little deep, whatever, like huge kind of redundant code now. I assume there's much better ways of doing it, but they're still using the codes from the 60s and 70s, which means that you're an end user of this technology that you communicate upon with each other. So there's that type of language. And then there's the other type of language, which is this revolution, which is my understanding of it, which I think this is now being closed down, is, so the previous technology relating to the internet might not be the television, but maybe more so the ballistic missile or the telephone. And these kind of work along switchboards. So you're communicating with one person directly along a switchboard, whereas the internet creates more loose coagulations where communication can simultaneously happen across many different fields.
Yeah, but it is literally a switchboard though.
It still is a switchboard.
That's what it is. It's an automated switchboard. That's what the internet is. Like, as a technology at base, that's what it is. It's called packet switching.
Yeah.
That is what it is. You just take the human out of the equation and you speed it up. And you allow for packet loss, which is important, obviously, because the information is traveling a long way over lines that may or may not be great. So like, you have a resilience built into it, and then an automatic switching system that allows the information to move as fast as it possibly can to reroute automatically if it runs into a blockage. Like if one node on the network is down, it routes around it automatically, all this kind of stuff.
So it's decentralized.
Exactly, yeah.
So there's no, at the end of John Carpenter's They Live or Terminator, you can't blow it up.
Exactly, well, that's the military aspect.
Well, that's why
it
exists. Yeah. So all these sci-fi films, they're wishful thinking. Well, if you want to blow up the internet, they're wishful thinking. You
might want to blow it up, yeah.
Yeah, well, you might want to blow up some old photos or something like that. But so there's these two things, right? So let's talk then a little bit. This might be the more boring stuff, so we might go over it. But the language the internet is written in. Is this just gobbledygook, or what is this? What's going on here?
Well, the thing is, it's completely polyglot. Like, that's the huge benefit of a system that allows anyone to talk to anyone.
Yeah.
It obviously boils down to ones and zeros like everything else does, but you can write into it in whatever language you want.
Yeah.
I mean, in what we deal with as users day to day, the front end of it.
Yeah.
Those are three basic technologies, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, like three languages as such.
So they're like New Latin kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, these are just like, HTML is just, it's the Tim Berners-Lee invention, right? This is the document structure that allows you to share documents across the network in a standardized manner. That's what that is. CSS is just, you change how it looks.
Yeah.
And the JavaScript part is you interact with it. And those are like, in terms of what we use every single day, every time we open a web browser, every single web page, that's what it is.
Yeah, and they're minor and old technologies. Not minor, but they're small languages.
But relatively simple. Yeah, relatively simple to understand. I mean,
well, how long have they existed?
So HTML is 32 years old, or 31 years old now. So and the others are younger than that. So
okay, all right. So that's that aspect of the language in which the internet is written in. Now, so this is like an English department thing. So it's not computer sciences. So the other thing the internet does for me is something I've known. Well, it's not for me. This is a stupid thing to say. The internet is a huge writing tool. The internet is a written space. And in terms of, maybe I shouldn't go there yet. No, let's not go there yet. Are there any language games to the internet in the sense of the metaphors of how the internet works that help conceive our reality now in the internet?
Yeah, I think that's maybe the most fascinating part of it for a reader, or someone interested in the lesson in the pure computer science of it, and in the motivations or the reasonings or the frameworks that people develop in order to talk about it and and develop things. I mean, that's the metaphors they are governing metaphors, or they're forgotten metaphors, or whatever it might be. And it's usually down to like what you think language is and what it does and how it functions. Like those are the kind of key aspects of like communication, which the internet is just communication, right? Like, so, and by internet, I mean it in the broadest possible sense, the network as a whole. So I think there are, like, to illustrate this, there are some certain like key things, right? HTML, the Tim Berners-Lee specification at the start, it has no concept of interactivity.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
And we take this for granted now.
Yeah.
But probably most an awful lot of the programmers and coders in the world are employed in getting around this fact, right? Like creating interactivity where there is none by nature. The concept of a link, which again is a Tim Berners-Lee thing, you click the link, it goes to a different page. Yeah. That's a choice. Yeah. That didn't have to be that way. A lot of people at the time were disappointed that was the way it went. Why not have the links be both ways? Okay. Yeah, so that is like, that's the mycelium network. There's this interactivity feedback loop, which... And feedback's the key word. Like feedback is where this all starts. Yeah. You know, it goes back to like Claude Shannon and Norbert Wiener and Feiner in the 40s, like during World War II, this concept of feedback, of like, and you mentioned ballistic missiles. Again, this is where most of the research was done in predicting the flight of missiles that were potentially coming towards the US. Like, if it's moving at this speed in this direction, what will it do in the next 3 seconds? And if we want to send an interception, how do we make sure that we hit it? So that's like a feedback process where you're constantly adjusting the parameters. Pinging, yeah. So like information on the internet is the same thing. Like if you send a piece of information, which is a very small couple of bytes of information, to a place, but it's not capable of receiving it because it's down or it's broken or whatever it is, it'll try again and it'll back off gradually. It'll fail eventually, but it has the capacity to like heal the information and make it full, even though it has arrived in these partial ways. And that's a feedback process by filling in the gaps and stuff like that. So feedback is like so crucial to the whole thing. And then what you get, and one of the problems I suppose that people have traditionally had with the World Wide Web as it has existed since like 1990 is that goes away. Now it's just like static things that you go to and sort of read. Yeah. It's a very academic sort of, you know, it came out of a research lab and it's quite obvious that it did. Obviously people have done a lot of things with it since, but like at base, that lack of interactivity, that lack of communication between them, of a way of persisting the connection between web pages, is a design choice that was made by someone who was interested in sharing research papers with his colleagues. Because why would you need that in that situation? You could argue that you would, but there are plenty of people out there who were arguing 10, 15 years before the existence of the World Wide Web that this was how you would have to do. Like you would have to have two-way linking. Ted Nelson's the most famous. So if we were to see this on a cline of the most amount of feedback interactivity and the least amount of feedback interactivity, we will get to writing and stuff like that soon. But there is like, so let's say there is the Gutenberg project. So I click Herman Melville, Moby Dick, and I read this. For me, maybe the internet should have stopped there. I don't know, that's enough. And then what is the most interactive feedback kind of connection that people would have in their lives now, in their working or social life on the internet? What could I envision that is in this alternate, because there must be some parts of the internet that still hold true to this kind of two-way or multiple-way reciprocity. Yeah, there obviously are technologies that allow you to do that. To keep a connection alive, I think is the most obvious one, where you're watching something update in real time. Yeah. Whether that's like, I guess stock prices would be the ultimate sort of governing version of that. But like, there are lots of things that you could be watching like that. And what you're doing is influencing that. And then you're just part of an information flow, which is like cyclical, which is quite different from the request and response thing that the internet generally is, as in you ask for this and something gets sent back, and then you ask for something else and then it gets sent back, which is how, you type Gutenberg project / Moby Dick and you get Moby Dick back. Which is quite different from having a live source of information constantly being fed back and forth. And so
this is two different worldviews. Well, not two, there are more inside it, but these are two worldviews. So there is a centralized, which could be hierarchical. Now, people don't like hierarchy so much, or they say they don't. And then there is this more interconnected kind of web, which is maybe you're less an end user of something given to you than you are creating it all the time.
Exactly, yeah.
So in what way is the Luddite like me, who is like, I got my Facebook, my Twitter, or something like this, what way am I creating the internet?
I think maybe my own personal issue with a lot of what we now call social networks is that, like, you're not creating the internet, you're creating something else. And that's why I started getting interested in this in the first place, is because, like, one, I just like to make things, and web pages are very easy to make. So they're very freeing in that respect. The technologies are extremely resilient and they're not going anywhere, and anyone can use them, and that's really cool. It doesn't cost you anything, and like it's like the eternal printing press, and it's free. And is it though? Is it not? Is
it not going anywhere?
No, it's not going anywhere.
The languages that you use to build these things.
But
the internet as a space is narrowing.
Because it has been taken over, right? It has become, obviously people realize that it is the most incredible advertising platform known to man.
Larger than the surface of the earth, probably, covered in advertisements.
Oh yeah, it's way better than that. Because it updates in response to what you do.
So when you say social networks, what's happening there is advertising.
That's all they are.
And maybe data. Now, there was, I think, like 5 years ago, everyone was terrified about data. I think that's kind of gone now. It's maybe more biodata now, or just metadata, I suppose, is the conversation now.
But the question is, like, what are you afraid of? Like, not to say, I don't mean that in like, what have you got to hide kind of thing. I mean more like, these things are just black boxes. They're not set up for someone to be like, watching the data as it comes in, going,
watched all of Friends.
Exactly. Like Netflix might be interested in the fact that someone watched Friends all the way through, and that they might want to watch something that's like Friends, or they might want to just watch Friends again because they're clearly obsessed with Friends because they just watched it the whole way through. This kind of thing. They make decisions based on that, but no one's making that decision intentionally. It's like you put it into a system. And again, this is the feedback. This is where the feedback has gone, is like it's into these pretty much invisible and certainly the untransparent, opaque is the word I'm looking for. Systems of algorithmic control over the environment that you find yourself in, and it's like anything else. Like people will game the system, right? Because no system is perfect. People will always try and find ways that like make the system work in their own way. And people who control the system will always try and make it work best for them. And then the person who has no vested interest in the system, but just wants to talk to their friends on Facebook, or, scroll through the feed on Twitter, gets caught in the middle, where they're stuck between all these like competing incentives. And it becomes very difficult, I think, to find like a middle ground or a comfortable environment in which to kind of like wallow in these spaces. I think that's like, for me, like anytime I go to Twitter at this stage, which is rare enough, thankfully, I just come away going, what's wrong with people? And that's like, people aren't really like that, but a lot of the time.
Well, let's okay, so I'm going to split that into two bits there, because I mean, now we're getting into it. So advertising is set up by Freud's grandson. Sigmund Freud's grandson sets up modern advertising through
century of the self stuff.
It's a psychological, image-based, language-based thing. So using all the insights of psychoanalysis, they set up advertising. So instead of the healing, which I mean is, I don't know about that in psychoanalysis, but instead of this purported healing of the fractured self, there is an exploitation of the fractured self through advertising. The internet is now an advertising space. Okay, so there's that aspect of it. So to some degree, whatever you could call it, the fallen nature of man, or in psychoanalytic terminology, there'd be different ways, but your impulsive, addictive, short-term self is gamed by a system into a feedback loop. And this feedback loop can, mainly on Twitter, it's interesting because it's a written form. So it's like an ideological form.
Yeah.
On Instagram, it's a pictorial form. So you could go more the iconography. So that was more my statement. Now, the second bit where I get onto the question is Bernard Stiegler, who a wonderful French philosopher, very interesting guy. He used to rob banks, and then he was in jail, and he did his degree in jail, and he wrote to Derrida, and Derrida was like, "This is brilliant, keep on going." So he got his PhD, and he became a philosopher on the technique, on technology in this kind of sense. But he has this wonderful story about when Alan Greenspan is standing before the American court, and he's lost, I don't know, trillions of dollars. And they say, "Where's our trillions? Where's our trillions of dollars?" Alan Greenspan goes, "Look, I don't know. It's the algorithm, my man. I don't know. I don't understand." Now, you could take that with a pinch of salt, or what Stiegler says is Alan Greenspan has been proletarianized by the algorithms the internet are using.
Yeah, yeah. I think the word that would maybe be used a lot for that in business analysis, I suppose, if you want to put for a better word, would be commodification, right? The individual piece, like the internet's, or technology in a more broader sense, both like hardware and software and all of it, its purpose really, it's under capitalism, is to commoditize everything. As in, you break every single aspect of life up into a commodity that can be traded or traded against or bet against or bet for, or, you know, it becomes a thing completely atomized from its surroundings, and therefore it can be transactionalized. That's the main thing. You turn every single aspect of any relationship into a transaction. And if you can find an aspect of human life or commerce or whatever it might be that has been inefficiently or ineffectively commoditized and transactionalized, you know how to do it, and you can find a way to do that, you're Airbnb. You know what I mean? Like, you are loaded. Like that. This is what tech does. It rewards finding the things that haven't been effectively.
And then when we come to the solutions, like you look at the modern climate change movement and a lot of modern Marxism, and you're asking for more and better quantification of these things, this more commodification, generalized, more systematization coming along these. So, I mean, it is possible to write better algorithms. That's a very simple thing. But to some degree, is that social engineering? Is it just we're being socially engineered now? Probably, I mean, maybe not in the most important way we're being socially engineered now, but definitely in the most biggest way that has ever happened on the planet Earth, we're being socially engineered through the practices of private health and things like this. Now, that's just a fact, is globally, this is an internet pandemic as well as a COVID pandemic. The way COVID has been handled just wouldn't be possible without this globalization of the media through the internet. It's just not. There's nothing like this in the past. So in terms of this commodification, right? I'm going to ask you this question, which you cannot answer. So this is like, now I've truly become an academic now, right? Okay. So there's the proletarian. We're the proletarian of the internet. We're out here with our pickaxes of QWERTY keyboards. So I'm going to split it into kind of two ways. And this is, bear with me, right? So there's the kind of early proletarian in the kind of more romantic Marx, where he says that we are creating useless people and useful things. He says that the modern worker is someone who has lost his or her ability to engineer their surroundings and is now a kind of end user of this kind of thing. Now, then there is the other Marx, you might say, where he like sees this role of the proletarian as overcoming what is above it. I don't know, that one might be harder to fit into this. So there's that type of proletarian that is the alienated worker, which is like, you know, like, I mean, little things you can't do by yourself. You can't actually do anything by yourself. So there's this idea of the proletarian overcoming their being caught up in the internet and not working the internet and not getting paid for the internet, creating the internet but not getting paid for the internet, being gamed by the internet, all of these kind of things. Then there is the sense, see, it's going to keep going on. Then there is the sense of, there's this philosopher, a German philosopher, very interesting guy called Peter Sloterdijk, who says that the idea of the proletarian is a Marxist mystification, that the working class is qualified, quantified, defined at the moment that it disappears in terms of its importance. So he introduces this idea of the burning class, which is the coal we burn is the new slave class, and we are the operators of the coal. Now, in this sense, we are the users of the internet that don't understand the machines that are running us. Is this fair? Is there an aspect of that there is some kind of outcome, as in a disalienation process or a reconquering of the space? And I actually don't mean just entirely economically here. Do you think this is possible?
If you'd asked me 5 years ago, I probably would have said yes.
Okay.
Now I'm much less sure.
Well, why?
Because I've put a lot of time into trying to understand it and trying to understand the technologies and what it can do and who's in control and like how it is controlled or like how it functions basically in the world.
Are you going to tell them who controls it?
No.
We don't talk about that.
No. But I think like maybe in some way one of the disturbing aspects of it is how little sense anyone has any great deal of control over it.
So the Alan Greenspan thing.
Yeah,
like you're
exactly.
At the top of the pyramid and you're still sacrificing.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, like you don't really understand it. Like, you know, there's a lot of people in that position, I think.
Well, then it is true. But then aren't we engaged in the true process of alienation, which is look at this world, who built it?
Oh yeah,
not me.
But this is like if you understood how fragile the ecosystem is in some ways, like it wouldn't. There's a guy called, what's his name, Steve Blow, I think is his name. He's a game designer, very famous game designer, and he gives this talk about like you know, just the fragility of the entire tech system, like because everything is built on something else.
Yeah,
you know, there's this very famous. I say famous.
I think he's really good.
No, I mean, as in very few people.
You probably haven't heard of him yet.
Know this happened.
Yeah,
I don't understand why it's important, but basically, like in any program that gets written is based on other programs, right? Other pieces of code. Like this is how you build up a program, and you know. There's a stack like what they call close to the metal basically is like if you're writing in assembly language or like which is one step away from the actual code that the machine understands.
Okay, yeah.
And then you go up from that into C is the most like famous one step up where it's kind of human readable.
Yeah.
And that gets compiled down and then that gets compiled again. And lots of the easier, shall we say, software languages to work in are stepped up again. Like and every computer language is in essence just an opinionated abstraction over this machine code. And like as we move further and further away from the people who in the 50s and 60s and 70s wrote the base layers of this technology, as those people disappear, i.e. they die or they move out of the industry or whatever it is, and people who are now in their 40s or 50s have only ever written stuff multiple layers of abstraction away from the base, you're losing people who understand the system as a whole. And it doesn't, you know,
This is very different from the major building blocks of our society. So like carpentry is using the same technologies since the pyramids, and every carpenter to some degree or another knows how to use a level or something like this.
Yeah.
And even a language is an extremely, like the languages of English or French or something like this, these are extremely durable tools that transform very slowly. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. But
so
like,
what you're saying is like, this is like very strange, kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, this is completely new. I think, well, it's not completely
Well, this
new.
kind of like forgetting, which isn't even a mark of an oral culture. This type of,
yeah,
you know.
I think forgetting is such a big part of it, and like you need an incentive in some way to learn. Like, you know, there are people out there, obviously, who are amazing engineers, like computer engineers.
Yeah, just in case you're watching. Yeah, there definitely are.
They definitely are.
So cool.
François Bellard, if you're out there. But like, you know, these people are very rare.
Yeah.
The incentive for most people who like get into writing code and working with computers is like, well, I'm going to get a job because it pays well.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to learn like a tiny bit of C, and then I'm going to do like
competency within systems.
Yeah, I'm going to pass the exams to get through this part, and then I'm going to go off and do something else. Like I'm going to basically the software engineer version of you know making widgets in a factory for. That's what it is. Like, and that's really well paid work now.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, they're the new bureaucrats. They're the new.
Well, they're not even like this is like. There are people like that who move up to who are managers or whatever, and they manage that kind of stuff. But like generally, it's like, you know, large company needs a form on their website to work, you know, and you make the form work.
But wouldn't I don't know. I'm riffing here. I'm going off the topic here. But wouldn't it be horrifying if they did know as well? You know.
Know what?
Well, if they knew how the systems we manage work. I don't know. Sorry, that's probably not a good point.
But there was at the start of COVID, there was a lot of. I can't remember what exactly caused it.
A bat.
I think it was, well.
I'm joking. All right. Sorry. This joke
took me a second because we're so far from the start of it that the bat no longer means anything.
Yeah.
But like
he's a middle manager now.
He's been promoted like 3 times.
Yeah.
COBOL is this language that runs a lot of mainframes in old financial systems that the banks run on, right?
Okay.
And COBOL is a very old language, and there are not many people, certainly not many people under the age of like 50, 60 who know how to work in it.
Yeah. Oh, I remember the and all the financial system works in it.
Basically, and it's like these huge computers that because it's so sensitive, like you don't want to update it very often. You know what I mean? You can't risk breaking it.
We lost all the money. We lost, in the world.
We just have these like extremely complicated systems that very, very few people have any like real oversight over as a whole. So you are in this like constant state of like people reinventing the wheel like all the time. It's like, you know.
So because of a lack of proficiency and a lack of history, a lack of proficiency in languages, which comes from a historicization of the languages used, it sounds to me like you're saying there's a shutdown event possible.
Of course it's possible, yeah.
But because, I mean, at the start of this conversation, when you talk about decentralized nodes, it kind of sounds like, you know, you can't shut down the languages, but you're saying there is this fragility there.
Well, the fragility is human fragility, you know, and social fragility. Like this is always the case. People have reasons not to be completist or perfectionist or academic about it, right? They have reasons to be, well, if I change my job every 2 years, I'll get like a 30 grand raise every time, and I'll be a millionaire at 29, I can retire at 35. You know, there's a lot of that in the tech world. So like people's incentives are all in one direction.
So the incentives to protect these systems would almost be like a kind of monastic study of multiple languages.
Yeah.
Like a kind of creation. So that's, if you wanted these systems to maintain, then you would need to have a kind of respect for this. Okay.
But you would also, more than that, you would want to be existing in a system where stability was desired.
Yes.
And the tech world is very obviously not that.
No, because that's not how commodification works.
Exactly. You always need the new thing. And so the new thing in tech generally relies on people forgetting that the new thing actually existed already in a different form.
It's like naked people having sex and we'll sell it for money.
There you go.
Yeah, genius. Well, what's have you an example of something they reinvented the wheel on recently?
Well, the sort of the meme version of this is like, congratulations, it's a bus. Where what if you had Uber, but instead of like collecting only like
one person,
it connected like 30 people and did it on a regular route,
and we'd
that be so much more
different
efficient?
Times for the route.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then someone goes,
someone made $1 billion out of that.
So congratulations, you've invented the bus. Like this is the system. Like we're constantly like, how many? I can't tell you how many like to-do apps there are in the world, how many calendar apps there are in the world. And actually, interestingly, one thing that obviously maybe of interest to the people, maybe the first thing I've said might be of interest to the people who are actually listening to this, but writing tools.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you might think like, how many different ways can you have it? Like Microsoft Word, maybe that's just like perfect.
Google Docs, and then
so these are like very big ones, but then you have like I know personally, like there are dozens. I probably have like half a dozen easy like installed on my computer right now.
Yeah.
And I check out different ones and then I get rid of them, or I use them for a while and then I forget about them, and like.
Yeah, I find it very interesting just with that. Just because there's a crossover with language now, which is why I'm interrupting, is there has been no evolution in terms of, this is what I was talking about, our language is durable. Our language is completely reciprocal and words fall out of usage or enter usage, but the grammar itself is this massive technology that everyone has in their head, especially if they never went to school or something like this.
It's like language is an incredibly resilient technology. Like,
are these then languages that you're talking about?
No, I think.
Is it like a different word? Would there be a different word in French or something like that?
I think like
code, is it?
Well, yeah, code is like an abstraction over language, right? It's like a way of instruction. It's an instruction set, like for a computer, right? So you're giving instructions. I think what it becomes interesting to me in terms of the history and forgetting and reinventing and stuff like this. And I'll use the writing apps as an example. It's like there are so many different ways that people want to write.
Yeah,
people want to structure, like, because writing is structured thought.
Yeah,
like there's no. It's like it's unlike any other art because for that reason.
Yeah,
there is no interface.
Yeah,
it is itself like the technology.
Yeah, it's a practice in the same way yoga.
Dance is maybe the
or dance. Well, I mean, there is like archery or something. Well, unless you're killing people with it, but there is these. It is. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Keep going.
It's like there's no interface, right? It's just like it's the technology that you use to create the writing is the writing itself.
Yeah.
So it is just thought made external in a certain way.
Yeah.
That's all it is, and that's what's so powerful about it. But also, like there's this within the tech world, much more so than the literary world, which just ignores all this stuff altogether, and probably for good reason. Thinking is obviously this like massively prized asset. It's very hard to explain the fetishism that goes on around this, but like learning to think better and
but what do they mean by this? Because they don't mean the Socratic thing. They don't mean that. They don't mean critique of the critique. What do they mean? Like a new way to run a bus?
Yeah, I think that's generally what they mean. What they mean is that they're looking for like
holes in the market or something.
They're looking for ideas and they're looking for ways of like effectively reaching them. And there's this huge amount of fetishism around note taking. Where basically the idea, like it's a huge thing of like the second brain and all this stuff of like, if you take all the notes all the time, you will somehow like sort of externalize your thoughts in this like really effective way, and then you'll be able to like come up with content basically and better ideas based on how well you do that and the structure that you have for maintaining that. Can
I just cut in there and ask you, because obviously I only have my books, I don't know about this kind of thing. So there's, in the European iteration that we exist in now of history, There's the consonants are writable in Greece 2,700 years ago. There are older written cultures. There's all of this kind of stuff. Then there's modern writing, the monastic tradition, Irish, that sets up the kind of parameters. Irish, whatever, but like a lot of Irish monastic people think of like spaces between words, paragraphs, full stops. They're not Irish, but you know, we'll take it. We have him in Roy Keane or whatever. Then you kind of have the printing press and Gutenberg's one. I know there's an earlier one in Korea, and they're probably all over the world, and they're probably ones that are 20,000 years old. So then you have this. Then you have the internet, right? So these are the big things in writing. So just asking you, in your experience of having worked in the tech world and having thought about the tech world, I've read several philosophers, kind of older guys, and they say, print, written, it's over, man, it's over. Like, it's all about iconography now. It's all about the icon, the image, this kind of thing. And I've even heard some claims about the shift to oral and aural, in the sense of like, you've got your Apple Watch and this kind of thing will happen. I mean, next they want the neural link. But there is this kind of, you know, the Internet of Things will be an oral process. When I look at it, all I see is more writing. I just see writing. I see the biggest production of writing that has ever happened is happening. Like encyclopedia, every minute of every day is being produced. Do you think there will be any fundamental shaking to the written word as the prime organizer of thought over the next?
No, because it's the best. Like it's the best.
Yeah.
Like it is the best thing we've ever come up with.
Yeah.
For like structuring large amounts of thought over time as well, like persisting that structure over time, which, as anyone who writes code will tell you, persistence is a big problem. Like how you choose to store something and whether you can access it later, right? As soon as you put something into a computer, you have to like you obviously have to encode it in, right, and then it has to be decoded out for someone to read it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's not stored as letters. Like you put Moby Dick into the computer. Yeah, it's not Moby Dick still in there somewhere in the computer. Like it has to
0, 1, 1,
exactly
1, 1,
right.
1.
So you have to rely on someone having created something to decode it if you want to read it, right? Books aren't like that.
No,
most of the time.
I am the decoder.
Yeah, it's all here. Like
or our culture.
Where this is why it's so resilient in a sense. Is like the technology for decoding the thing which has been written down. Because again, writing is a form of encoding. At base as well. Like it takes the thing that we have in our head, the thoughts, and gives them,
which are structured as a language and have been for several,
as long as we've been able to express the thought. So like we know that this is how it works, and everyone is very comfortable with that. And even if like I can pick up a book in French, and I might not know French that well, but I know that it's a book. It's in French. You know what I mean? I have like certain tools that would allow me to make educated guesses and work around pages that are missing, or like all these. There's all these very good reasons to store things as paper, and also from a memory point of view as well. It does seem to be the case that people will remember things that they read on paper much better than they do things that they read on a screen. There are theories around that, and spatial awareness being so important to memory, like it's like when you walk through a door and you forget what you came for, like the change of space. Yeah,
it does. It's a new mind space. But then, I mean, there are cultures where huge amounts of knowledge is transferred without any writing, and have been historically. So there are these alternatives, such as, I mean, I learned to practice recently where you had to learn it with your eyes closed and only through physical repetition and listening. And this was very effective. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because I don't think the internet has provided any new form of learning in the pedagogical sense.
No, I completely agree.
Whereas what you were saying earlier was that there was this possibility of creating new methodologies of practice. Like practicing the internet.
But if it's going to be a practice, it needs to be something that you can do yourself. And that's why the technology, to me, is like why we're at such a worrying point, I suppose, is that most people have absolutely no idea that they can do this.
No.
And
they'd be dead if they lost their phone.
Well, it's that, but also the fact that you can't
socially dead as well.
Well, no, yeah, but some of us are there already.
Yeah, long winter.
But like, you can't code your phone.
No.
Like, certainly if you're on an iPhone or an iPad, you can't. You have no control over that as a piece of technology. Like, it's completely locked down.
But this was designed very intentionally.
Oh, very, very intentionally. Like, and the apps can't talk to each other.
Yeah.
Or they can only do so through extremely tightly controlled channels, and that's for security reasons. And if you're going to sell something to like billions of people all at once, chances are the security matters more than the hackability, for want of a better word.
Creativity.
Whereas like the browser, even though it's made by the same people, like I'm using a Google browser on an Apple device.
Yeah.
I can still script that browser. I can like open it up and I can make it do what I want. Any web page. That's what's so like exciting about the web as a platform, and what people don't maybe realize has been lost, particularly over the last 10 years since the rise of the iPhone, because it created this system of like applications that are completely separate and atomized, and hardware platforms that are just not user-friendly at all. They're user-friendly in the sense of like, you click on the thing and it works.
Well, they're easy to use.
They're easy to use, but they're machines for like 2-year-olds. You know, if you're 8 years old or 80 years old, you can use an iPad. Okay. And there's a benefit to that, but there's also like a loss in that like it actively frustrates the concept of using your own tools in your own way. It's not your tool, like you're just renting it.
Okay, so I mean, I think now we've gotten to the nub of it, in the sense of, in my experience, risk aversion is always chosen over self-expression in the culture I live in a much broader sense than that of the internet. But we live in an insurance society where we exist as end users that can't express in certain ways because of we're conceived as nodes upon a vast system, and if there's any part disruptive within that, it doesn't work. And the internet has been structured, maybe more Apple has been structured in this way than maybe these other forms of internet you said. Now, with that, this kind of risk aversion thing that happened, which is safety, is there to some degree a way of ensuring expressivity or tools that I can use and that don't use me, and balancing it with risk in a more interesting way? I mean, it's only now in this generation I consider myself a user of the phone. Like in the past, I might have considered myself as an Irish citizen or a Catholic or a member of a community or something like this. So that's kind of a rhetorical question. I'll let you get to that. But I think we've come now to the point, a guy that, I mean, you recommended to him, me to him, him to me, he's dead, you're not going to see him. But Ivan Illich, who wrote 3 remarkable books in the early 70s and is kind of not having a moment now, but he will probably have a moment. He wrote Deschooling Society, which says just get rid of schools, except for Maynooth Arts Department. Right. He wrote Medical Nemesis in 1975, which is that doctors make you sick. Anyway, we won't go into that one. We won't talk about that one.
We are running out of time.
Yeah, but then the third one is tools for conviviality.
Yeah.
So he talks about using the tools that we have to create more social life. Now, I'm going to run through this, which might leave you less space to talk. He talks about 3 possibilities for using tools. No, I'm going to let you talk about that, but he talks about 3 things that have to happen before we get to use the tools. 1, we need to take hold of our language again and repurpose our language so that nouns aren't verbs and verbs aren't nouns, and we have a more kind of associative, loving language. The other thing he says is we need to demythologize science, which seems the least likely at this stage. I mean, Ireland is still in the heroic phase of its demythologization of myths, so maybe we won't get there yet. Okay. And then his third one, which is probably the most important, the roof, the constitution of limits. So 2 questions to kind of finish up on, and we might give it back to there. do you think, so I talked about the proletarian, the overcoming of these things that use us. Then there's social engineering, which is the most prevalent. It can be coercive or less coercive through your mind. But then there's this constitution of limits, which is the law, basically, is like this much technology and no further for this generation. You can only own this amount of things. You can only go at this speed. That could work for your car, but it could also work for your internet. So with that, do you think, in this sense, the 19th century and the 20th century were very progressive? Humans are going to conquer the stars. Is the 21st century then, does it have to be conservative, in the sense of conservative around the issues of the body, matters of scale?
Yeah.
And then what are these tools for conviviality? So they're the two things I'll
well, I think obviously we are in an extremely conservative moment, for exactly the reason that you said, which is risk management. There is no acceptable risk.
None, zero.
For pretty much anything in life.
Yeah.
And like David Graeber has great stuff about this, about like bureaucracy basically, and its incredibly insidious hold on every single aspect of contemporary life. That's obvious to anyone who has any engagement with the state or any company larger than like 10 people.
Yeah.
Right. That's just, it doesn't matter if it's public or private or whatever it is, like the bureaucracy is deadening and total, like it's completely there. And this comes back, like it's a way of ensuring no one takes the blame.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Like, it's just a way of making sure that this complex system that we have to manage, i.e. like the administration of a health service, because it's so complex,
yeah,
we can't have individuals be
self-healing or something.
Well, no, we can't have individuals within the system be responsible.
Undiagnosed.
Well, no, but they can't take responsibility for when the system goes wrong.
So okay. So in that sense, the health system itself is proletarianized,
yes,
by its own systemic nature.
by its reason to exist. It's like you create a system whereby everyone within it feels like they don't have any power.
Yeah.
And the problem is always elsewhere. This is the Alan Greenspan thing, right?
Yeah.
Bureaucracy, and the Federal Reserve might be the ultimate bureaucracy in some ways. Like it exists in order to maintain itself.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. The idea of tools for conviviality, I suppose, is like, how do you create tools, by which I think Illich means both implements, things that we use with our hands, or tools that we actually use like ourselves, or social systems, i.e. the education system or the health system, that don't require management. And like, that may not be like fully possible.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely ridiculous to presume that we can't make efforts in that direction.
Reorient it.
Yeah, but like this is like, there's a guy who's very important in the sort of computer space, I suppose, at the minute. A guy called Brett Victor, who's like, he's a technologist, does like interactive computer systems, and like he talked about like inventing on principle. So he has this talk where he talks about like this system that, like a little program he made, there's like, that would have immediate interaction, right? Like that's the principle. Like if you want to draw a tree or you want to draw something, you need to have instant interactivity.
Yeah.
And like, so that your actions are immediately reflected back to you by the system. That's like his principle. That's his principle. That like, that's how he develops systems, like in programs, based on that principle. And we could, if we wanted to, develop tools in this broad Illich sense, that on principle, the minimization of bureaucracy is central to that aim. And therefore you develop things around that. Like we don't have that. Our principle at the minute is, as you say, like risk management.
Yeah.
And that applies to every single like aspect of life, official life, shall we say.
Well, even no, but the internet is this space as well. It is risk management.
Yeah.
Very heavily now.
Like there's a really ridiculous case going on at the moment in America, which maybe illustrates some of this. There was a state website, I think it might have been like Missouri or somewhere like that. I can't remember where it was, but and through some developers not being very good at their jobs, I guess, or being lazy or just incompetent. The website exposed in the HTML of the website, not hidden in any way, the social security numbers of thousands of people. And some journalists noticed this. And the journalist published a story saying, this state-run website has exposed the social security numbers of thousands of its own citizens. And that journalist is now facing trial for hacking a state website, even though it was like in plain text. Yeah. All you had to do was click like view source, whatever. Like I was saying, like the website, because the web is operable in this way, you can see how it's made. And that's how generally people learn how to make websites, is by looking at how other websites are built. That's why it's so resilient. It's like you can just look at one and figure it out. So this guy was looking at this one and he found this. But this is like, you have the governor who wants to avoid embarrassment.
Well, isn't there another journalist on trial today, Julian Assange? It's his hearing today for, but
it's a little bit different, but it's like,
well, it's risk management though at the highest level.
Of course, But like, this one is like, this is like combines in my mind like a complete misunderstanding of the system that's in place, i.e. the technology and how it works, a sort of vengeful, I suppose, for want of a better word, state apparatus that chooses
otherwise it has to take the blame.
Otherwise it has to find someone to take the blame. And then at the heart of it, like, is the actual person who wrote the code, who clearly should never be allowed to write.
If you need because humans need their sacrifice. This is your sacrifice.
But the journalist is the one who's going to take
the
it.
exposer of the system is the one that suffers. There's a few gospels about that.
Exactly. But it's such it's a fundamental truth of like human like existence.
But these are the levels of human psychology that don't change. Are the blame management through the sacrificial figure. That's this kind of thing. We're kind of running out of time, and I'll see if there's any questions, but I don't think there are. I want to finish with a nice question. I thought of it this morning. I thought it was cool, so I'm going to finish with it, but you don't have to answer it. So an artist you love, David Lynch. I love him as well. And an artist I love, Alejandro Jodorowsky. They, in their work and in other places, they've specified that in the 1950s, North Americans had the atomic bomb, and they had film and radio. So music and film. And the film was the ability to shape your dream space. So what you believe possible. It's like this kind of classic figure of the pointsman who changes the tracks. You're looking at the change in the tracks, not the tracks. Film is this, and then the nuclear bomb is obviously the nuclear bomb, right? So if today the internet and its social spaces have replaced film, what is the atomic bomb today?
Well, you just summarized my next book, Oisín. I'm very, very grateful for that. The atomic bomb is, to me, it's the start of the illusion, I suppose, or fallacy of, or not the start, but it's the pinnacle, I suppose, of scientific supremacy, I suppose. Science for its own sake, like in the way that we say art for art's sake. The atomic bomb is science for science's sake. And there is no justification for it. There wasn't at the time. And, Oppenheimer said at the time, you get an idea, the idea is good, you kind of think, oh, that's very good. And you follow it through, and, you got an atomic bomb. And then you look back and you go, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. But like
there was
but you can't help yourself. Like these people are scientists. Like in the way that you hit on like a piece of work or an idea for a story or whatever it is you're doing, and you follow it through, and you might look at it afterwards and go, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Or, their consequences are obviously very different because the scale is different. But I think it's the same impulse, and it was an impulse we should probably try to understand in
I wrote a whole book like that. Oh, not a good idea.
Put that away.
So this supremacy of science, which, will be...
Which at this point has become absolutely endemic, like within society, because...
And it's operationalized through the internet, which is a written space.
And it's obviously they share a root in World War II in terms of like the people and the actual technology, were very much linked.
And
I think what we see in the internet now and what we see in the complete, I guess, reification of technology within our everyday lives, in that we allow it to infiltrate and control more and more and more aspects of our relationships with other people and with ourselves.
Yeah.
That is, to me, like the direct result of a certain type of, I would say, deeply American, despite the fact that it was mostly European immigrants, confidence.
Yeah.
And short-term thinking, and being sort of blinded by the shiny thing.
Yeah.
You know, and like technology, certainly consumer technology at this point in time is just shiny things. Like nothing positive or new has happened in consumer technology 15 years
since the widget.
Certainly not since like the late 90s, I would say. No. You know, it really just hasn't. Like the fundamental advances were made a long time ago by government funded researchers.
Yeah, because of
that has now been, as a matter of state policy, been operationalized, commoditized, transactionalized by what we now know are the largest companies in the world, like Apples and Googles and Amazons and whoever else.
Well, I think we figured it all out there.
I think we're just getting started.
Well, we got the diagnosis. Well, now we'll turn it off, the cameras, and we'll talk about Judy, as you say in David Lynch.
We're not going to talk about Judy.
No, we're not going to talk about Judy. But that's the diagnosis. And I mean, within that talk, maybe earlier, there were more solution-oriented parts in terms of taking control back.
If I would say anything, it's like solutions are not really where we need to be.
No, it's the fundamental roots.
Like better questions.
Yeah,
better questions is all you can hope for.
But this is like, I mean, there are myths, and the myths happen overnight. But if you go against the myth, it doesn't work. I don't know. We need something more fundamental in the orientation of our shared existence has to happen.
Yeah.
Read Moby Dick. Yeah, and Minor Monuments by Ian Maleney as well. Is there any questions? Can we see any questions? I assume not. You're also, all six of you are so shocked by how wonderful it is. Okay, brilliant. I think we'll leave it there then. And I want to thank again Ian Maleney for that fascinating talk. And I want to thank Tracy for overseeing the tech on this, and Maynooth University, the Arts Department, the English Department, and Kildare County Council. Thank you very much. And I will see you guys again. Around December, we'll do something else fun. All right. Over and out.